What do you do when the world seems cruel and inhospitable to you on a personal basis? Maybe you have the strength for real politic, but me, I'm going home and watching TV, and that can be a productive thing in some ways. An entire field of literary criticism does exist, illuminating connections between stories, history, culture, politics. There's an industry for that, and it does matter to some people. There's even the bright and shining tower of academia. You too could be a part of glorious published work with peer review and accountability and studious thinking where tenured people reject identity politics on the basis that homosexuality hadn't yet been invented in Dostoevsky's village until you realize that sensible discourse is happening on legitimate, respectable platforms like Tumblr.com. But in all seriousness, people are engaging with media criticism in a new way, and we have to think about how we evaluate texts in response to that. It's that shift in our culture that leads me to the big question for today. Is there any practical benefit to arguing about a fictional character's personal identity when the text itself doesn't tell you about it one way or the other? Certain schools of lit crit argue that if it's not in the text, it might as well not exist. You say this alien is gay and non-binary. Well, I say that this businessman is a Sigma Alpha sent to call the libs. What's the practical difference in arguing those interpretations anyway? Once upon a time in media criticism, deductions only existed in realms of pure logic and thought where the best interpretation had the most concrete relation to the text itself, and things like opinions and personal reaction didn't matter because it was all an academic journal anyway. But now we exist in a realm where your personal identity extends and touches the personal identity of everyone else. So yeah, the rules of the game have practically changed. And today, that's why I'm going to argue to you about the practical benefits of the transgenderism of a cartoon robot from 20 years ago. You can take any character who changes and string together a loose connection with trans identity of some kind. For example, is this guy from Community a transmasculine icon because there's a running gag where everybody else razzes him about masculine standards that he doesn't meet? Maybe there's something there. It feels like a stretch to me, but posts like this can be more thorough and traditionally lit crit. Such a post might break down multiple artistic elements present in a single scene or chapter and then use those concrete examples to illustrate the connections of a large character arc where one figure overcomes the boundaries that constrain them to self-actualize and seize control of their own future, which, in a way, is the most empowering way to describe transition. But for those of us reading at home, we know that real life doesn't get narrative resolutions. So these extremely cathartic analyses can feel pithy or insufficient. Critics of trans interpretation aren't even transphobic sometimes. They just might chafe at the idea that 22 minutes of TV somehow solves the real struggles of identity-based discrimination. Anyone who watches the entire run of any TV series has spent enough time with that text to have a personal relationship. Hearing that that relationship is somehow different than an entire school of interpretation, it feels weird. It feels like somehow illegitimate. And I can understand the impulse to debunk interpretations on the basis that they aren't grounded enough in the text. So, what then is the point? What's the practical benefit to transing a show? Well, here's how watching this robot cartoon with a transsexual lens makes it objectively more fun, and I'm right. My Life as a Teenage Robot is a 2003 animated action comedy about a teenage girl superhero robot who battles villains of the week and learns what it means to be human. It's magical girl meets humanoid androids. It ran for 3 seasons, and the overall focus and tone of the show shifted between each of them. Season 1 had the most personal feeling. Jenny has to reconcile her humanity with her powers and responsibilities as a superhero. Season 2 took a much more serialized action format. Villains of the week became recurring characters who challenged her on a more complex basis, creating fairly interesting dramatic moments. Unfortunately, this more serialized format died away during season 3, and all we had left was a lot more stock cartoon plots that you might be able to predict if you've seen any animated show, and it died away shortly thereafter. It's interesting to look back at the show in a post-streaming world where long-form animated storytelling has become wildly more successful. From 2002 to 2005, this show's parent network was obsessed with episodic cartoons. 11 minutes of no-context fun that could be endlessly rebroadcast for any kid who tuned in at any hour of the day. It had been proven successful, and understandably, they wanted to keep doing that. For example, season 2 was supposed to end with this big 44-minute episode called Escape from Cluster Prime, where Jenny battles a main villain and has some major character growth. In a series of episodes remarkably similar to an arc that would end another major serialized cartoon action show some 15 years later. But because Nickelodeon wanted to have a highlight episode, they just broadcast it earlier than they were supposed to, and then season 2 ended with this awkward run of episodes that brought back the main villain inexplicably and wrecked the continuity. It also had a quirky art style that was much harder to translate to marketable toys and tie-in products, so it's easy to see in hindsight why the show didn't make it big and keep going. But it's that quirkiness and desire to push against the grain that allowed it to achieve such interesting characterization. How trans was the robot? Let's go through every single episode and deduce the answer to that. There were 40 episodes. Most of them followed the 2 shorts format. Some of them didn't. So really there are 76 individual stories. Most of the characters in this show are pretty cishet. We can ignore them safely, so about 2/3 of the episodes go straight to bottom tier. But what about those 26 episodes that are in my notes? What's going on there? Episode 1, 1A. Let's start with the first thing the character says.
Do I make myself clear, XJ9?
Jenny.
What?
Jenny! Call me Jenny! I changed my name to Jenny, remember?
Ugh.
The episode plays up this I'm not normal enough bit for drama, but even the first plot line shows that the major supporting characters not only view her as a person with little compunctions, but the things that make Jenny different are a source of empowerment, and even more important for a young audience, they're a source of coolness. Jenny's friends never stop calling her weird, but even while they do that, they appreciate how her weirdness enlivens the world around them. Being weird in this universe is cool. This is an issue that has split trans people since time immemorial. Would you rather everyone treated you as normal and forgot about your difference, or value that which makes you different and appreciate it, talk about it? This series is more in line with the latter. Because of that, episode 1 is going straight into S tier. Episode 2A has Jenny wear a horrifying human skin in a bad attempt to blend in. Flesh is a prison. D tier for that one. But episode 7A actually brings back this exoskin as a living, talking character. First, Jenny gets kicked out of this local hangout in what feels like an allegory for racial discrimination, but then she puts on the exoskin, trying once again to be more normal, and it becomes this literal voice whispering into her ear.
Me, jerk.
A normal young lady would let the boys handle this.
She's suddenly not just normal, but attractive, drawing the male gaze and enjoying social power for the first time. That's how you know trans women are women, because we get double the social points when we look more fuckable. Not only does the exoskin act like the internal voice regulating one's own behavior, grinding away at the mind with social pressure, it also physically stops Jenny from doing what she does best. And that is a harsh reality of femininity. Being high femme doesn't immediately stop a person from enjoying other hobbies, but looking that way takes time and it takes energy. In the end, Jenny has to sacrifice her crowd-pleasing looks to live her life and do her thing. Anyone who's been femme for a minute can understand the taxing nature of self-maintenance, but for some it's a struggle with high stakes for every trip outside the house.
We will be normal!
This one gets S tier for wrestling with that balance. Episode 6B also has a makeover theme, but this time it's more fun than horrifying. It introduces a recurring theme where Jenny gets along better with guys than she does with other girls. Once again, she's suddenly popular, but this time in a more robotic way, and she generally feels good about it. The normal girl characters can't stand her unique, outstanding looks. What stands out is how fragile her moment of beauty is. She protects it like an irreplaceable resource, both for her own confidence and her social capital. Once again, she thinks it's lost, but finds that her friends and allies are willing to support her, whether people see her as weird from time to time or not. Pretty balanced perspective. A tier. Episode 8B is the source of this image, which is a pretty funny coincidence, but definitely not more than that. The pink, white, and blue trans flag design dates back to 3 years before this episode was made. It wasn't yet widely recognized as a symbol, but this episode is interesting for how it portrays socialization between kids. Jenny gets thrown into kindergarten due to a comical misunderstanding, and at first she laughs it off, but then she tries to outdo the other kids, and she gets told that she's below average because she can't socialize properly. She's too egotistical and aggressive, too much of a loner to fill her role as a member of the kid community. It's surprisingly dark stuff, and it speaks to a general anxiety that many kids develop when they have any form of difference from those around them in their identity. Jenny essentially fails to mask despite her extreme capabilities, and for that she gets ostracized. In the end, the misunderstanding is easily resolved, but the episode gets B tier for portraying the impossible standards that normal 5-year-olds enforce on everyone around them. The very next episode is less subtle. Its main villain is introduced to the series by infecting Jenny with puberty. It quickly escalates from, like, zits and teen awkwardness to, this.
Thanks for making me look like a complete
Fool.
Whoa!
Oh no! Now my voice vocoder is malfunctioning too!
In this show, puberty is not a natural thing. It was inflicted on the hero by the main villain in the villain's very first appearance, and it's not only saved through the power of science, restoring her to her true form, but it looks like this. You could be pragmatic and argue that a more masculine puberty is animated here because animating a first period or boobs would be too controversial for a kids show, thanks double standards, but this is the imagery that we're left with in the text. Once again, it ends with everyone having a good laugh and Jenny suffering no shame about her own body, but that's quite the complex personal arc to pack into 11 minutes. S tier. Arguably top 1. 9B, the other story of this episode, gets an honorable mention for putting Jenny onto the football team. Once again, she is one of the boys, but nobody really cares about that. C tier for interesting she's the man type energy. 10B brings us to supporting character Sheldon, a nerdy friend of Jenny's with an unrequited crush. Sheldon episodes vacillate between adorable and creepy, but the early ones are a more interesting dramatization of how these two characters parallel each other. They have a lot in common, but they're ultimately incompatible. In this one, Sheldon creates an alter ego called the Silver Shell, a character that he uses to mask his true self and fight crime while trying to impress Jenny and, trick her into thinking robot guys aren't as good for her as he is. Sheldon's attraction is creepy and weird, but it is good drama. He, not like other girls, is Jenny extremely hard, and Jenny reacts how a real person would. She immediately rebuffs that weird stuff, but she and Sheldon are still friends because they have these things in common. And it's complicated because, in a way, Sheldon is right. There aren't other robot guys around for Jenny. If Sheldon was just not weird about it, they might really have something there. He tries to make the only other robot guy in town seem like a shallow jerk, but she falls for him anyway.
I'll never polish again.
It's really tragic stuff because Sheldon can literally fix her. Even the Silver Shell himself is kind of a trans-ish affectation. He's big and with a barrel chest and booming voice and heroic demeanor that Sheldon himself can't gas himself up into having. But because he's hung up on the nerdy, low-class nature that others have forced him into, this character remains just a shell. A few episodes later, he returns, and a similar dynamic plays out, but it's interesting because Jenny doesn't bother to spare the feelings of these guys around her once they step on her toes. She doesn't bend over backwards to spare their egos. She just stands up for herself, and it's not questioned. And once she does that, there's no clean resolution. The other guys just get rebuffed and have to deal with it. Solid B-tier, feminine coming-of-age stories for both of them. Let's skip ahead to season 2 for the third and final Silver Shell episode, which is a prom episode. Prom is like the final exam of manhood and womanhood for young heterosexuals of America. Even queer prom has become a tradition unto itself where young adults take back this opportunity that was denied to them. Jenny wants a date. Sheldon tries to play the ideal man, and it's a disaster because Sheldon is still lying about who he really is. Also, a gang of alien biker fish lesbians keep busting up the place. Sheldon wants to be powerful and in charge, like a man, but he misleads Jenny in order to try and seize this power. In the end, Jenny solves all the problems herself, and just like she was the one to do the asking out to the dance in the first place, Jenny fulfills this role that society doesn't want her to have. She does things that are the man's job. But she does them, and she doesn't make a big deal about it. It's only when other characters are insecure about it that it creates problems. The arc of Jenny and the Silver Shell ends here. A messy but charming slice of T for T complication. A tier. Finishing up season 1, I give Daydream Believer a D tier because every person I know has also been too high in public at some time. Also in D tier is This Time with Feeling because of this clip.
You've got no feelings, you've got no feelings.
Ah, even robots get depressed. Season 2 kicks off with the excellent Humiliation 101, a light comedy where Jenny tries to keep her mom from explaining her origins to the entire school. Like any kid, she's embarrassed by family photos, so this one goes into D tier. Did you know that Jenny hates the cops? She never gets along with them for a single moment. And they constantly hassle her because they don't get what her deal is and why she's like that. Episode 16A, gets a C tier for that alone. 16B, Jenny learns about planned obsolescence, and she embraces the meaning of transhumanism to escape it.
I'll upgrade myself.
Respectable D tier. 17A is... Wait, why did I write this down?
I don't care if he is part dog. I'm gonna stand by my man.
I swore I wouldn't wear this outside the feline fan convention.
Meow, 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 meow.
We're just gonna put this one right over here and move along. 18A is a rare instance of Jenny trying to fit in with the other girls. Other girls are unfortunately regulated to antagonistic roles in this show for the most part. That trend will get broken in a few episodes, but this one features mostly mean girls at a sleepover, that most sacred of adolescent girl rituals. Jenny tries really hard to fit in, but realizes she's just being used as cheap entertainment and ultimately ditches them. Also, the cops are a thorn in everyone's side, once again. B tier. 17B introduces a bunch of new characters. Jenny struggles to fit in with humanity, once again, and finds herself suddenly hanging out with other superheroes. Isn't that just the way? You grow up in a small town, everyone's so normal, and it takes years before you finally meet other people with your weird powers. Then all you want to do is spend every waking minute with them, bond super hard, and then it's a struggle to balance your normal people with your super people. But your super people live in a commune outside of town, and they don't want to associate with normals ever again, but plenty of your friends are normals, and you don't think you can just cut them all out of your life because you still need to work a job and keep connections with your family, and you don't want to live with the supers because they're constantly all sleeping with each other in new and exciting, complicated situationships, but none of them ever do the goddamn dishes. And what was this episode about again? Oh yeah. Jenny breaks it up with the super polycule. A tier. Now, the other superhero characters don't return except for Misty. Staff recognized that light feminine and dark feminine are an iconic character dynamic. Oddly enough, Jenny's only had boys to hang out with due to the circumstances of her upbringing. So when she finally gets a positive relationship with another real one, she pours all this time and energy into it, enjoying their like-minded bonding about body modifications.
I missed my chance to go to the sci-fi convention, so hey, we are sci-fi.
Yet, despite their closeness, they seem to bring out the worst impulses in each other and ultimately have to call it quits. Misty gets into B tier. Later in season 3, Misty comes back and her rebellious streak starts to get the better of her, and the two of them have to part ways for good.
I thought we were friends.
It's sad, but much like Silver Shell, this messy T for T relationship gets into D tier for that. Also, this episode contains this random line.
Come on, Jen. It's ladies' night at Mesmer's, and you're the closest thing I can find.
Come on, Brad, I know you're not in on this elaborate interpretation here with me, but do better. We're gonna skip ahead to more of season 3 and save the best episodes of season 2 for last. Incidentally, leave a comment below if you didn't even know this show had 3 seasons. Because, fun fact, they weren't broadcast until 3 years after they were animated. Because Nickelodeon just saw this show wasn't making enough money and gave that airtime to something more profitable until they needed to fill in dead air. These episodes did air earlier on in several other continents, which for the more internet savvy circa 2006 meant that all the hardcore fans pirated these episodes, giving these the worst ratings of all.
Can you help me? Please make them understand.
邪魔しないでくれ。君何言ってんのかわかんないよ。
This is my first time reaction to this third season from 15 years ago. Sadly, it does not exactly hold up. It is worth checking out if you are curious. It has a handful of genuinely great episodes, but most of them feel like watered down season 1 kind of energy. 33A has Jenny get hassled by the cops again, D tier. 36A has a Jenny acts normal to impress boy plot once again, but this time it's funnier because she wears this shirt. C tier for that. But 31A is where Season 3 finds its footing. It brings back Melody, a character featured in one earlier episode, who plays a dark foil to Jenny. She's also a teen girl robot with superpowers, but she's cuter and immediately becomes romantically involved with Jenny's best friend. Jenny doesn't mind that, but she does mind losing all of his time and attention to someone who's just suddenly shown up. Sadly, Melody has to mask her origins even more so than Jenny.
You're a robot? Jenny was right. You were hiding something from me.
The whole reason I ran away from my dad is because I want to live like a normal girl.
But you lied to me. How can I ever trust you now? So she's mechanical.
She was built by an evil scientist and cannot coexist with humans in the way that Jenny does due to the severe trauma that his upbringing inflicted on her. Damn, that kind of psychodrama kind of explains why they canned this show. I mean, can you imagine seeing this bit immediately after SpongeBob?
You're as evil as your father. I'm not evil. I'm a normal girl. I am normal. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere.
It was just not meant to be. A tier for giving Jenny a tragic relationship with every other transhuman character who shows up. 32B is lighthearted fun. Turns out Dr. Wakeman has a sister. They're complete opposites, and this one is a hippie. Well, more like a druid. She can just do plant magic and nobody really questions it. But she too has crafted her own child through non-natural means, and amusingly, Dr. Wakeman thinks that's weird. The whole plot is about these two learning to
Respect each other's differences.
Jenny's cousin is a golem boy who's got a great heart, but he is pretty short and smells kind of funky lately. Sometimes it's like that. B tier for trans cousins. Wish we could see more of those. The final noteworthy episode of Season 3 is 34A, which features the return of the lesbian space fish bikers. Now, these characters have a very retro dykes on bikes aesthetic in all of their appearances, but this episode really ups the queer coding by showing them in their day-to-day lives on their home planet, where they have to act normal, and they become horrified at the prospect of Jenny outing them.
Oh my goodness, if the ladies in the sewing circle find out we've been cruising around in leather and chains?
Jenny only threatens them with this outing because they've bugged her and turned her into a motorcycle. So everyone is cool to each other in the end. But this is such a American butch/trans history deep cut that it's fascinating. And it also comes on the heels of this one random joke 2 episodes earlier.
What? Can't a guy wear pearls and taffeta around here?
Strictly speaking, only after 6.
So, S tier for extensive transvestite American history. Now, let's wrap it up with some of the most interesting material the show has. Escape from Cluster Prime is the show delivering on the premise of its first episode. Jenny's struggle to coexist with other humans comes to a head at the beginning of this special.
I'm very disappointed in you, young lady.
What a madness!
Somebody should scrap her.
A pox upon her house.
Jenny wonders if she'd be better off on a planet with people more like herself. And just as she wonders that,
From the sticks, huh? Never been to a Robotropolis before? You're gonna love it.
but on Robot World, she finds that things are not as ideal as she might have hoped.
Finally, a place where I'm accepted as a friend.
This is the enemy. Traitor to the robot species and monstrous defender of the human world. XJ9 is a vile and malicious super robot who can stretch out her spidery arms to horrific lengths.
Well, who can't do that?
So if we were still using my robots as trans people analogy, this would make the robots seem kind of evil, but Cluster Prime reveals that most of them are just ordinary persons. It's only their political leadership who pull the wool over the eyes of the masses for their own gain. They use this propaganda that makes Jenny seem like a hulking, massive, unnatural perversion of normalcy in order to have a scapegoat for their own imbalanced wealth and privilege. Because of that, none of the other robots on Cluster Prime are empowered in the way that Jenny is. They are shocked that she can move and act in the way that she does. So once again, she has to mask who she is in order to fit in. It's the main villain, Vexus, who is responsible for this problem, and remember how, in her very first appearance, she was the one who infected Jenny with robo-puberty and messed with her body? Suddenly, these things parallel each other and pay off. It's like they planned it. This recurring theme with the cluster is wanting to control Jenny's body, whether that's making her go through puberty, plugging her brain into a giant mecha, or demonizing her in their propaganda to socially sabotage her. They always want to deny Jenny her humanity, to reduce her to her difference and nothing else, thereby assimilating her. All of Jenny's new robot friends could be happy and at peace with themselves the way that she is most of the time, but their political leadership has denied them this, withholding a sort of medical miracle cure that could immediately give them the agency that they need in order to live healthy and productive lives, because hoarding that resource gives them power. And as soon as the robots get their hands on this resource, they're suddenly able to self-actualize. I don't know what you could possibly parallel this development with, but surely nothing real people are going through. Let's just laugh at this frame where this robot grows a big phallic sword out of her hand. Oh boy. Of similar thematic strength is the last long episode, Victim of Fashion. This one's interesting production-wise. It was the first episode animated for season 2, and it shows what Teenage Robot could have been like if it had a 22-minute format instead of an 11-minute one. It's a slice-of-life episode. Britt and Tiff are mean girl antagonists. They bully Jenny to assert their social hierarchy. Jenny knows nothing about dressing like a girl, so she hits the lab with the boys to become an expert and rival them. But Eddie and Patsy here are the queen bees and will not abide this. So they shoot back by body-shaming Jenny into thinking she's not thin enough. Jenny can't transform to be smaller, so she resorts to dangerous, unhealthy practices to get thinner.
Is that really such a good idea?
I don't care! Take it out! Take it all out!
Therefore, she learns the value of balancing personal pride and social responsibility. Nothing unusual for animation. But remember how we said that this show's quirky visual style made it more difficult to merchandise and market? This visual flair is what makes the more characterful moments so evocative. Jenny can transform into anything, and even though this show doesn't have a huge number of animation frames, it's storyboarded magnificently. And that works so well in this episode because it's about transforming herself, self-actualizing. She gets on her own operating table to transform, cackling maniacally. She blooms like a flower, turns into a beautiful butterfly. If that's not obvious enough for you, she even makes herself a giant clam. What more do you need? This episode has the most easily analogous symbolism. But I hope that all of these cases put together make the point that this has a transness to it. You don't have to view it that way, but if you do, it makes looking forward to Jenny's next personal adventure a little bit more invigorating. And it's worth revisiting this show in particular, because unlike many trans characters defined by their arcs, Jenny is mostly a flat character. She's already cool with who she is for the most part, and a surprising number of episodes end with her just laughing off the hang-ups of the people around her when she's already performing a valuable service to society and is confident in the choices that she's made.
I think you've learned a valuable lesson today. Always be yourself. You're special just the way you are. It's important to stay true to yourself and...
Save it, Beanpole. Who are you, my mother?
You should be proud of your robot powers!
In fact, a surprising number of episodes even lean on this plot device where Jenny becomes evil, like only Jenny can create problems that Jenny can't solve. The world needs a few characters like that to balance out the more complex, introspective ones. Thankfully, this show has found some new support in pretty recent history. It finally came to streaming via Paramount Plus last year, and Jenny made that appearance in the Nickelodeon Smash-alike fighting game, which I recently got to play, and despite having a rough launch, it really shaped up into something fun. Compared to other Smash or platform fighter type games, it's a lot more slippery and fluid in its movement. According to the people who really compete in this game, Jenny's not amazingly strong, but she's pretty fun to play. She's basically Samus, which is appropriate. I'm not holding my breath for this show to ever get an HD re-release, but it was animated for SD-TV, so I'd argue that wouldn't really look great, even if it existed. Rob Renzetti, the guy who originally conceived and pitched the show, has actually announced a kind of new content that is coming soon to an inbox near you. The guy has a website that you can go to and just sign up for free to an email newsletter that he sends out, and he has announced that he is writing a short series of original fiction featuring the character. And initially I thought, okay, so is this dude just doing good quality fanfic of his own show? What makes it more exciting is that Alex Kerwin, original art director for the series, has been brought on to do some illustrations for these stories. We wouldn't have Jenny without a large cabal of passionate artists, but these two were some of the most involved throughout the run of the entire series. So if you want to see some sort of resolution for this character after all these years, I'd highly recommend giving him a free subscription and seeing what comes of that. In conclusion, rewatching the show helped me on a personal, edifying level. As I mentioned in the beginning, things for trans people are not super amazing in my home country right now, and it will take the tireless work of many involved people to make the situation less horrifying. But that work takes its toll on a personal level. You need stories. You need some kind of release and catharsis while the situation is dire. And this show is just one example of what that can look like. This sort of interpretation can be healing, and that's why I think it's important. Get out there and keep on transing your favorite characters and telling people about it.